Look at all that money. Look at all that money. Yeah, the money that they've spent. Take another look and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Well, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, it's time for hemp.
Good morning and good afternoon, mercy, and good evening wherever you're at. That was a good hit. And speaking of good hits, we would be grateful if you had a good hit underneath and hit the like button and maybe the subscribe button if you haven't already, and share us with your friends. I am your host, Casper Leitch, and you are watching Time for Hemp all around the world on the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network, and we thank you for tuning in. Before I get too far down the road, I do want to remind you that anytime you hear the word joint on the big broadcast, that you hit your pipes, your bongs, your vaporizers, and your joints, and join us as we take time for hemp. We have a groovy show today. Every show is really groovy, but this show is groovy because we have a guest on today who's from a state that borderlines my state. I'm from Indiana. This gentleman will be from Kentucky. And we're going to be talking a lot about the history of the Kentucky hemp fields, which really is very significant to the history of this country. And that's why it's quite an honor to have this individual on as a guest. I also have a hunch that he and I have had a few joint friends in the past that we'll be talking about. But before we do that, let me bring on one of my joint hosts, Al Graham. And Al Graham, how are you doing up there in Canada?
I'm doing good. How you doing down there in Indiana?
Pretty groovy. But I tell you, what's got me excited about your work is that you continue to do this on a regular basis on a thing called Pace Network.
That's right. Yes, Pace Radio Network. We have broadcasting 7 days a week, and we touch on cannabis as well as psychedelics. You hear from patients, you hear from business owners, and you hear from advocates as well.
And what kind of programming? You're like 24/7? Is that it? You're on all the
No,
time?
not 24/7 unless you click on a podcast. But we have programming each day of the week. Monday, we've got the news. We got talk show with cannabis and coffee on Monday. So there's two shows Monday. Tuesday, there's two shows broadcasted. Wednesday, there's one show that's broadcasted. Thursday's got one. Friday's got one. Saturday, we're going for hours nonstop. Everything is replayed that's been playing through the week.
So when people tune in, they can get a chance to get some great entertainment and learn an awful lot about our favorite plant, cannabis hemp.
Exactly. Oh, and I can't forget to mention the Veterans Action Council. They are on Sunday evenings.
Well, and speaking of veterans, we also have another joint host on the big broadcast who's also an amazing author. He's got a groovy little book that I'll let him tell you about. Al Byrne. Al, thank you for joining the big joint broadcast here at Time for Hemp.
Glad to. Morning. And it's not a little book. Come on. It's 360 pages long. And it's that's a significant book. It took me a long time to write that. Anyway, it's a good book, guys. It's about my 40-year or so journey through the cannabis world, especially the medical cannabis world. We touch on hemp, of course, and basically it's history that identifies who did what and when and how, people that you've never heard of. But anybody that's in the modern cannabis world, we just didn't get here. It's just that you just didn't wake up one day and it happened. It took 40 years and we're still not done. And the book will tell you how, who, and why, and what you need to do in the future. I'm very good at telling people what to do. The other thing is, It's a book full of information, cannabis information, medically orientated. So if you're a doctor, a nurse, any kind of health professional, a patient, a loved one of a patient, or just a friend, buy the book, learn something. Might help your friend, your mother, your father, whoever, to have a better life, maybe even have a cure for whatever is wrong with them, up to and including cancer. We have found this plant to be remarkable. And so that's what we're going to really talk about today, is a remarkable plant, mainly in the vein of hemp. So we're going to hear about all these different things that hemp can do. And I'm glad Casper mentioned that Kentucky, where our guest is coming from, was instrumental to the development of the United States of America. I'm going to let Joe tell you about that. But Kentucky was the place that allowed the early Americans to have hemp everything, hemp rope, hemp clothing, sails for their sailboats, for their ships. Anyway, our guest today is a gentleman named Joe Hickey Sr. from Kentucky, a historical hemp state, if there ever was one. Joe, welcome. Nice background there, dude.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm in my backyard here in Kentucky in the spring. So beautiful this time of year here in Kentucky.
Yeah, sure is.
Sure.
Well, we're glad to have you, Joe. And what we'd like you to do, we start with all our guests, is to sort of find out why and how and when you got involved with the cannabis plant, and go from there right up until, you know, whatever's going on. We'll have some questions. You're bound to raise some questions.
Right.
But maybe we could start with, you know, when did you fall into love with the hemp aspect of cannabis?
Well, you know, everybody has their own, you know, story of what happened. And mine was really a haphazard thing. Is my dad was an antique dealer. And when he passed away, I ended up with these newspapers that were bound up in book form. And so I'm reading through them, just looking at the history, because it was back when I think Lindbergh was flying from New York to Chicago to Atlanta to Miami and down to Belize. And I just left Belize where the government had changed and we lost all our contracts. So I was back in Kentucky wondering what I was going to do next. And so I'm reading through these newspapers, and one day I see the headline says F.G. Clay resigns from the Kentucky Hemp Growers Cooperative. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, because we've got the Kentucky Tobacco Growers Cooperative, but to find that there was a hemp cooperative, I was like blown away. I was like, you know, what's going on? Because I'd never heard of it. No, I've never heard anybody even talk about a hemp co-op in Kentucky. Yeah, I knew that hemp was grown in Kentucky before Kentucky was a state. And it was in Danville, I think, was where the first crop was grown, Danville, Kentucky. But that was about the extent that you'd ever heard about hemp in Kentucky. So I started looking into it and found out my grandfather grew hemp, and started looking around, and I actually ran into this book called The History of Hemp in Kentucky by James Hopkins, a doctor from the University of Kentucky. And so I went and met with him, and he told me about in Paris, Kentucky, which is about, 30 miles from here, that there was some old equipment there. So I went to Paris, Kentucky, went to this old feed mill and found this old equipment. When I say I found it, it was there. But it there was a hemp softener and a comb that was run off of these big belts. And he showed me pictures of the belts and the run and everything. And then he said, well, let me show you some files. So went into the mill, and he had like 4 or 5 file cabinets completely full of all these records where the Navy was buying hemp from Kentucky and using it for, I guess the war effort. And so, I'm getting really interested. I'm kind of just blown away at everything I'm finding. And so we started talking to these old farmers and finding out what the history was there. I heard that France was growing it, so I called the minister of hemp in France, Chanbray is I think what they called it there, and he put me on to Ian Lowe in in England, who was petitioned England to start growing it, which they did a year or so later. And then he sent me to Joe Strobel and Jeff Kime in Canada that were petitioning the Canadian government. And so I had all this information and old pictures, all the EU rules and regulations on hemp. And one day in 94, I heard turned the radio on. I heard that the governor was having open door at 4. And anybody that wanted to talk to the governor about anything could just go in and sit down and talk with him. So I told my wife, let's go over there. And she said, you're crazy. And so I finally talked her into it. And so I took all the material and went over there. And I sure wasn't going to tell them I was going to talk about hemp because I figured they wouldn't let me see the governor. So at the time, that's when all these CEOs at the tobacco companies were swearing under oath that in Congress that hemp wasn't, that tobacco wasn't, or nicotine wasn't addictive. And I knew what was going to happen. I saw the writing on the wall. Anyway, so I laid all this information out to the governor and told him, that, we're going to lose tobacco. These farmers, we got to do something to help the tobacco farmers. And so after looking through all this information, he looked up at me and said, Joe, if you were governor, what would you do with all this information? And I said, well, Governor, if it was me, I would form a task force to look into see if what I'm telling you is true or not. And he said, well, I don't doubt that. He said, I don't doubt it at all. And I went, well, it's not so much you, it's more the public. And if the public, sees that what is going on here, then they'll believe it if it's coming from a task force. And he said, I think you're exactly right, Joe. He said, he looked over at his ag guy, Jim Claypool, and said, I want you to work with Joe and let's get this done. So that was kind of the beginning of what really put Kentucky on the map and really kind of brought hemp into the mainstream of, at least Kentucky consciousness at that point. And so he formed the task force. And now I'm thinking, okay, we've got the governor, we got a task force, so let's just get a law passed. And so I went and spoke with the legislators, or this one legislator, and said, why don't we create legislation that allows farmers to grow hemp? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, Joe, he said, if I introduce legislation to introduce hemp, said people will think I'm going to try to legalize marijuana. And he said, I'm not going to do that. I'll lose my job. And he said, people don't know the difference. And until they do, I'm not going to do anything. So at that point, I knew that, education was what we had to do. So we reincorporated the Kentucky Hemp Growers Co-op. And I had teamed up with Dave Spalding, who worked in the ag department at the University of Kentucky, and Andy Graves, who was the president of the Fayette County Farm Bureau. And his dad, Jake Graves, was the chairman of the board emeritus at Nashville City Bank. So he was a pillar of the community, head of the Fox Club, the fox hunting club. So we told Jake, we're going to reincorporate this. We'd like for you to be the chairman of the board. And we'd like to talk to you about hemp. And he said, you boys don't need to tell me anything about hemp. He showed us a picture. When he was 16 years old, his dad had died. And it was a picture of him weighing hemp with one of the guys that was breaking hemp. And he said, I know all about hemp. And we're going, well, this is perfect. So, and early on, we talked, he tried to get hold of Senator, what's his daggone name? But anyway, the top senator here in Kentucky. I'm going blank on him, but
it'll come to you. It'll come to you.
Yeah.
Oh, so you'll blurt out a name.
Well, he's still there. He's the guy that's been up in the Senate longer than anybody else. He was ahead of the Senate. But anyway, he called him because he knew him personally, and Mitch McConnell. And,
Mitch McConnell, exactly. Yes.
Mitch said, Jake, he said, I can't even be seen with you. And, years later, now he's this would kind of be his legacy because he was the one that really pushed it to get the bill passed in 14, then again in 18. But anyway, so it formed a task force. We started educating all these people, hoping we'd get legislation at some point. And one day, a buddy of mine that was a friend of Woody's, they showed up at my front door, and Woody said, I'm hearing about everything that you guys are doing, and I want to come and be involved in it. And
that's Harrelson, folks. Woody Harrelson he's talking about.
Yes, the actor, Woody Harrelson. And so so we started going out. We did, events with Woody. We did a essay contest for high school kids and grade school kids with the thought that if you educate them, then they'll go home, and more than likely their parents are going to have to help them with the essay, so they would learn something about it.
It's odd how it's so backwards these days.
Right. Well, and this happened later on, but what happened with the legislators is we knew that, legislators are just hard to really get to. So what we did, we put a care package together with all these hemp products, creams and lotions and soap and all this stuff. And we sent a package to every single legislator's wife in Kentucky.
Wow.
There you go. There you go.
And so, so
he knows, man, get the women and you got the men. He understands
so
that.
I mean, what we were doing was what, you hear of guerrilla marketing. That's basically what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so after a few years, we were getting all kinds of PR. And in 96, Woody had just finished shooting, the movie had come out, The People versus Larry Flint. And Larry had been testing the First Amendment, the right to free speech. And so we were thinking, okay, he was testing the law. So we think, okay, well, let's test this law where they had changed the law here in Kentucky because a friend of mine, Gatewood Galbraith, had run for governor like 3 or 4 times. And he was like a statesman. He was tall, lanky, and he was an attorney, but he knew the law. He knew the legislation. He knew,
I've heard of Gatewood. I've heard of Gatewood all the way up here in Canada. What about you, Casper?
Well, Gatewood was one of the first guests on my television series. I met him in 1991 at the Earth Day event in San Francisco. Jack Hare learned a lot from Gatewood Galbraith. Gatewood Galbraith put together the marijuana feasibility study in the 1970s, and his grandpappy, as he used to say, grew hemp, and Gatewood was born and raised in hemp. Gatewood taught me that Kentucky was the wealthiest commonwealth in America until they outlawed cannabis, after which it went from being the wealthiest commonwealth in America to the most poor. coming in last when it comes to economic, coming in last when it comes to jobs, coming in last when it comes to education, all because they outlawed hemp. Gatewood was a perpetual governor candidate and really opened a lot of minds. A very, very dear friend of mine. When he passed away, it was a really sad year. Gatewood was a champion of Time for Hemp. He was a guest on the show about once every other month for as long as he was alive after 1991. And Gatewood pushed me into doing Time for Hemp, even when I felt like it was time to retire. So Gatewood's one of my biggest heroes, and I loved him dearly.
And then just before we lose that picture of Gatewood there in the middle, that's Casper there on the right with hair. No kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, hair and a mustache. But
it tells you how old that picture is.
It's probably also historic because of the fact that of it being cannabis related TV show back in the 90s.
Anyway, back to Joe Hickey here, but we had to put a highlight on Gatewood.
Yeah.
He's a fine man.
Great dude.
Yeah.
So anyway, he was so effective that they would stop him. You know, he in the Democratic primary he would lose, so that he didn't get to really debate. He would debate in the Democratic side, but not on the Republican side. So, and it was, you know, it kind of pissed the Democrats off what he was doing. So he just said to hell with everybody. He signed up as independent, so he got to go in and debate the Republican and the Democrat. And he just absolutely eviscerated those guys. He was famously said that there was it was called the bot trop scandal, where these legislators were selling their vote for like $200 a piece to vote for this trotting track in Kentucky. And they caught them doing it. And so during one of the debates, he said, if I had known you could buy a legislator for $200, said marijuana would have been legal a long time ago. So anyway, so what they did to, you know, because he had just they didn't know any other way to get back at him. So what they did, they took out the exceptions in the Kentucky law for that in the marijuana, where it says marijuana is this, and except for, and then it talks about the parts that are hemp. So they took all that part, they eliminated that in the legislation as a dig for Gatewood. So I got the idea, you know, because Woody had just finished shooting Larry Flint, the people versus Larry Flint, where he was testing the law. I said, Woody, let's test the law. And I said, let's plant hemp seeds and get you locked up. And he went, what? He said, get me locked up. He said, I can't get locked up. I said, well, they're not real, you know, you won't be going to jail. They'll take you down and book you, but, you know, you won't end up jail. He said, well, what's the worst thing could happen? I said, the absolute worst thing could happen would be 30 days in jail. He said, I don't know about that, Joe. And I said, look, you're not going to get convicted, so don't worry about it. And so we finally sit down and figured it out. And what nobody really knew at the time, and I've only said this a few times, is we really set the whole thing up. I went to a buddy of mine who's an attorney and told him what we wanted to do. And so he met with a guy, he was a county attorney. I think it was Lee County. But anyway, so what the agreement was is Woody would plant the seeds, and then we'd get him locked up, and then in court, if he was found not guilty, the prosecutor would take and appeal it to the higher court. And then if we lost, then we would appeal it, and we'd go back and forth till we got the Supreme Court. So that's what we did. And so what we were trying to do, and again, all this was just a big PR campaign. So what we decided to do is have the first international hemp conference in Lexington. And a buddy of Woody's was Peter Bayhuth, who was a former executive director for Greenpeace. And he had been hired away by Ted Turner, who was giving away, I think it was a couple $100 million back then, which was a hell of a lot of money back then. And so Ted Turner was funding the Kentucky Hemp Museum and Library that we developed as a nonprofit, and was giving us money. So when we got the idea, he said, well, we'll get Peter to get TNN, what was called back then, the Turner News Network, to bring some cameras up, and we'll get all these. We invited people from all over the world to come to the conference. We had people from Australia, England, Canada, France, Ukraine. I mean, we had people from all over. And so we were going to have the conference on Saturday. So everybody came in on Thursday, and on Friday, we took all those, the guys from all around the world, we took them to Simpsonville Elementary School, to Donna Cockrell's classroom, and talked to her kids about hemp, and went out and planted a tree. And we had the newspaper. Buddy of mine was a newspaper dude, a reporter. So we gave him the scoop. And so after we left, because nobody knew we were coming, she didn't tell the principal or anything. We just walked in and did it. And so the DARE teacher went nuts. And so the next day on Saturday for the conference, the headlines in the newspaper was about Woody and all these experts around the world in Donna's classroom. And then they had the DARE teacher talking about how Woody played a pornographer and wasn't a good he wasn't a good role model for our children. And so
Jesus.
so we're on the front page, so who cares what, just as long as you're, what's that saying? It doesn't matter what they say about you as long as they keep saying it.
Get your name spelled right.
Yeah. So anyway, so we had the conference on Saturday, and it was packed. I mean, we had the Marriott not the Marriott, the Hyatt just completely packed, standing room only. And so then Sunday morning we get up and take TNN News Network with us and drive down to Lee County. And again, nobody knew this, but we didn't have any land to plant it on. So the prosecuting attorney, we met in his office, and his daughter, the prosecutor had some land, out of town. So he deeded an acre to his daughter, and then his daughter deeded an acre, rented an acre to him for a year for, I don't know, $2,000 or whatever it was. And so that's where we end up going out planting the hemp. And so Woody's planting the hemp. I call the sheriff, and so the sheriff shows up, and Woody's got a hemp shirt, hemp pants, hemp shoes, hemp hat, everything, and he's got a grubbing hoe digging in the ground, and it's just rough old ground. And so he's digging it up, going, farming's awful hard and all this. And so the sheriff shows up, and he's going, what's going on here? And Woody's going, well, he holds his hand out, and he got 4 hemp seeds, because 5 would have been a felony. That's how crazy it was back then. So he had 4 hemp seeds. He wanted to plant 11 because that's his favorite number. And I said, you can't do that because it's a felony. You got to stay at 4. So he said, I got these 4 hemp seeds here, and I'm going to plant them. So he put them down the ground and pats them in and everything, and stands up. And the sheriff looks at him and says, well, he said, do you realize you're under arrest? And Woody's going, yes, sir. He said, would you retrieve those seeds? And Woody's going, okay. So he gets down there, and the seeds look like dirt. I mean, the same color and everything. So he's digging around. He can't find the damn seeds. And the sheriff says, okay, you're under arrest. And so they, handcuff him, put him in the car. Oh, I don't think they handcuffed him. I don't believe. But anyway, they planned him, put him in the car. And so that started the whole 4 years of, going back and forth to court. And so
4 years.
4 years. And
Wow.
so one appearance before a judge was one that the judge happened to be an old friend of mine, just accidentally. We didn't plan that.
No.
But he ends up presiding over one of the cases. And so I called him up, and it was Judge Bill Trude. And I said, Bill, I said, I've never asked you for anything, but I'd like to have the trial held on this date. And he said, well, I'm going on vacation. And I'm going, look, have I ever asked you for anything as long as we've known each other? I've never asked you for a favor. He said, no. I said, well, I'm asking you for a favor. And I said, you can just go on vacation the next day. I said, it's going to be less traffic. And so finally he agrees to it. So we have the date. He's, goes in front of the court and everything. He's found not guilty. And so I said, when you go outside, just say, today is Independence Day for Kentucky farmers. And he went, what? I said, just say it. I said, I don't care if they ask you if you love your mama. Just keep repeating, today's Independence Day for Kentucky farmers. So we go outside, and of course, Woody's going, hey, today is it, and so the next day, the headline in the paper is Independence Day for Kentucky farmers. And I told Woody, like 2 or 3 weeks before this, what the headlines were going to be. And he said, how do you know what the headlines are going to be? I said, I'm just telling you. So we go home after the trial that evening, and I get up early the next morning, go into town. We were staying at a buddy's horse farm, and got the newspaper and brought them back and threw it on the bed, and it had Independence Day for Kentucky farmers. It was the 4th of July.
All right.
So, but I mean, there's just a lot of stories that went along with the whole thing. But to cut it a little short, he was found not guilty in 2000. And then after, we'd been going for 3 or 4 years trying to get a law passed. And finally, we did that little trick of sending these care packages to all the legislators' wives. And we had also done, Woody paid for a survey from the University of Kentucky that came out. It was 76% of Kentuckians somewhat are strongly favored allowing farmers to grow hemp. So we had that with us. And so we go to the legislators, and we went to David Williams, who's the president of the Senate, because it had already passed 2 years before in the House. And he said, if you boys can get to enough votes, he said, I'll let it hit the floor. So we had enough votes, and we tried to talk with him. He wouldn't even meet with us. So Governor Nunn, who had talked into doing Woody's closing statement for his trial, I went to him, and that's another great story, but I went to him and told him that, what was happening, that David Williams, the president of the Senate, wasn't going to let this hit the floor like he said he would. He said, are you sure you guys got the votes? We're going, yeah, we got the votes. He went, jump in the car, and he drove, 80, 90 mile an hour everywhere he went. And so we get over there, go up into the Capitol. We walk in his office, and the secretary says, Governor, he's got somebody in there with him. And he just says, that's fine. And he starts to walk in. He said, Joe, just wait out here. So he walks in, comes out. This other guy comes out a couple minutes later. And then about 5 minutes later, the governor comes out and said, let's go. We get out in the hall. He said, it's going to be heard tomorrow. So it got heard the next day and got passed. And the one thing that really helped Kentucky out is I had the forethought of adding one sentence to that legislation. It's the last sentence in the legislation that said, Kentucky immediately adopts any and all federal rules and regulations pertaining to industrial hemp. So when the Farm Bill passed in 2018, we were able to, well, we had started a company in Canada in 98 called Kennex. It was the first hemp processing facility in North America. And so we'd taken some of the seed that we'd collected back in 92 and 93 and 94. We'd taken that seed to Canada and crossbred it with a Hungarian variety and came up with a variety called Denny, after Woody's daughter, Denny, Montana. And so we smuggled the seeds into Canada and then smuggled the seeds back out of Canada. And I like to say we smuggled it, but it was actually UPS. But so we planted the seeds that year in 2014. So we were the first state to plant legal hemp, and we planted that seed back in the same field that we had collected some of the seed from. So it was like the seed coming back home.
Oh, cool.
And so, and I'll tell you the story real quick about when at Woody's trial, I asked the governor to do the closing statement. And so before the trial started, I gave the governor a hemp bar. And I said, if you can figure out a way of using this during the trial, do it. So he's up there giving a closing statement, and the prosecutor, Tom Jones, had already given his closing statement. So he's up there talking about, and you guys know what jury nullification is, and I don't know if most people do or don't, but it's basically saying that the law is wrong and you're not allowed to do jury nullification anymore. But he was doing it, and he's an ex-governor, and the judges let him just go at it. I guess he was afraid to stop him, but he was going, if you think the law's wrong, you shouldn't convict somebody on an unjust law. And then, he said, I've got a hemp bar here. And he said, with permission of the court, he starts opening it. He doesn't ask for permission. He just says, with permission of the court, I'm going to open this. So he takes a bite and he's chewing it, and finally, and he's looking back and forth at all these jurors. And finally he took a big gulp, swallows it, and he's looking at them. He said, well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, I got it on me and I got it in me. He said, so if you're going to convict Mr. Harrelson here, said, you're going to have to convict me too. And you can see the jurors, everybody, you just got quiet, And he said, I want to tell you one last thing. He said, my esteemed colleague here, Attorney Tom Jones, says that Mr. Harrelson is only here because he's trying to legalize marijuana. And Tom Jones is writing, he's writing like he's busy, and he's looking down, and the governor walked right up to his thing, and he said, if I believe this for 1 second, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and he took his hand and slapped it down on the table real hard. He said, and Tom Jones jumps up, and everybody, it kind of startles everybody. And he said, I'd be sitting at this table right here. And then everything was quiet again. And he turns around, walks down, sits back down next to Woody. And the jurors go out, and it wasn't 25 minutes. They came back out, and I'm watching them. I'm sitting next to Woody, and they're going, Woody, it's not guilty. He said, how in the hell could you know it's not guilty? I said, because they're looking at you. They wouldn't be looking over this way if they was not guilty. He said, you think? I went, yeah. And so he was found not guilty, and that was what really changed those 6 years right there between 94 with 7 years, I guess, in 2001, really were the defining moments that really brought hemp back into the consciousness of the whole American people.
Which is why we brought you on here, Joe, because you are a legend, man. And those stories are, wow. damn, I'm sitting here going, and you didn't put this guy in your book, Al. What's wrong with you?
But hey, I was behind the scenes most of the time. You know,
Well,
I
who
was
was
the
I?
guy. I was the
Yeah.
guy behind the curtain.
You were
Yeah,
a guy
but
behind the curtain, but you're pushing all the right buttons because wow, that's quite the story. And I
Yeah, and not
remember
only that,
when Woody got busted and seeing that on the news and everything. So to
yeah,
hear
but
the
this is
backstory behind it, that's
the best
and
is
then
crazy. And
it was
by the way, when we're done, Joe, if you could hang on a few minutes, I got some stock market questions.
well. Another thing is, and Andy Mead was was my friend that was a reporter, and Andy said, Joe, this was the first time in the history of this newspaper that somebody has been on the front page of the paper, because Friday's thing with the school was on the front page on Saturday, and Saturday's conference was on the front page on Sunday, and the planning on Sunday was on the front page on Monday. So we had the front page of the newspaper 3 days in a row. That had never happened before, unless it was a war or something, or some kind of catastrophe. But
Well, I'm going to ask a family question of you.
sure.
Yeah, your grandfather, one of them, was a hemp farmer of some sort.
Yes, yes.
Was that during World War II? Because I don't know if
Yes.
the folks know, but we have a movie called Hemp for Victory.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And so was your grandfather involved in Hemp for Victory somehow?
Well, I mean, that's what he was growing for. I mean, he was growing.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah.
No, that was.
Yeah. So he was growing. I just want to, audiences don't know this shit, Joe. They're all young kids. They don't know squat. We're old men. We know everything, right? So what I want to point out to these people, as you mentioned it, the United States military desperately needed hemp in World War II to win the war.
Yeah.
They needed hemp. The boots were made out of this, parachute cord, the mooring lines, etc., for huge battleships. All this stuff was hemp.
Well, I'll tell you another story about Kentucky. Was Henry Clay, who was another orator. He was the guy I was trying to think of that Gate would remind me of. But Henry Clay was he had gone to, because he was like an ambassador to Europe or to Russia. He had gone to Europe and smuggled back hemp seeds out of Russia, because they had some of the best fiber varieties over there. He smuggled that back and brought it to Kentucky and planted it. So that's how far back this goes.
Yeah, we're in the 1770s or something, 60s when they did.
Yeah, 70.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Henry Clay would have been, I guess he probably would have been in the early 1800s.
Okay. Jefferson, though, did the same thing. The president of the United States, when he was an ambassador or something, took seeds back from France, smuggled them in because he could, diplomatic immunity and all that.
Right.
So our history is, so you're right up there with the other good smugglers. You're smuggling stuff in from Canada.
And let me jump in here for just a minute. A friend of mine by the name of Jack Hare, who hired me as the individual who unearthed the film Hemp for Victory. Yep. He had contacted the Library of Congress on several occasions by letter and phone, asking for a copy of it. They said that it did not exist. So they personally went to Washington, D.C., and they tracked that down. Mm-hmm. And if you go to timeforhemp.news, you will find a blog post that I did featuring Jack Hare. And on that blog post is a video of the Hemp for Victory film. And before you watch the film, it's only 14 minutes in length. Jack Hare does a presentation on how he discovered it. And then after the 14-minute presentation, he talks about the significance of it. So it gives you the opportunity by going to timeforhemp.news to find out exactly how that film was unearthed and the significance of that important historic film called Hemp for Victory. Thank you, gentlemen. But Jack Hare should always get credit where credit is due.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and then what's happening, at the present time with industrial hemp is all the regulations that are going, that are out there. Some of the crazy stuff that's happening is, hemp would be a great feed for animals,
Oh,
and, people are allowed to eat hemp and hemp seeds and hemp meal and everything else. But the FDA says you can't feed it to animals unless it's grass certified, and hemp isn't grass certified. And the only reason hemp doesn't have the grass certification, in 1958 they started the grass program, generally accepted as safe, or
okay.
generally regarded as safe, is what it is, GRAS. And so it they left hemp out because it was illegal back then, so it didn't get grandfathered in with corn and soybeans and all the other crops, and so that's why it's not grass certified right now. So what's happened is the FDA has said now you can feed laying hens hemp meal as long as it doesn't have more than 2 ppm, two parts per million of THC in it. And what most people don't understand, if you said describe 2 ppm to me, how would you describe that? You can't visualize it. But if you say 2 ppm is 2 inches in 15.78 miles, that gives you a little idea
Yeah, it does.
of what 2 ppm is and how crazy it is. And so the Hemp Feed Coalition spent, I think, $300,000 or $400,000 in research and everything to get the hemp meal allowed at 2 ppm, and it's absolutely crazy.
Oh,
Now, if you want to get a broilers, it's another 300,000 in 2 or 3 years of research. If you want to do goats, it's another. And every animal has to be grass certified, or through the FDA, and it's absolutely just. I mean, it's just another roadblock. First, it
right.
was the FDA. The Kentucky hemp growers sued the FDA. I mean, the DEA twice. Once over stopping us from bringing hemp seed in from Kennex in Canada, our factory up there. We had shipped 5 or 6 tractor trailer loads of hemp seed to the bird seed companies, and it wasn't sterilized. So the DEA went nuts and said, "You bring it back, or we're gonna charge you." And so we had to sue them to stop them. And then they stopped our loads of fiber that we were sending to Indiana Biocomposites that was making car parts out of it. So we were doing all the right things, but the DEA and Customs basically shut Kennex down. We shut it down in 2002. So here we are in 2025, and now it's the FDA that's the roadblock for what's going on here. So, and another thing that I'm working on right now is how do we make hemp, industrial hemp, how do we make that into a commodity? Because it took soybeans 150 years to become a commodity crop. And it's going to take hemp another 30, 40, 50, 60 years, whatever, to become a mainstream commodity if we don't do something. Because what I'm telling people is, look, the farmers know how to grow. Growing hemp it's not brain surgery. It's not, something that they don't know how to do. And there's processing equipment out there to process hemp. So that's there. So that's not a problem. And then on the market side, 86% of, in a research done, it's an article I just wrote on LinkedIn that basically, I think the title was Industrial Hemp is Going Nowhere. And basically what I'm saying is, we've got 86% of people saying that they'll buy plant-based products, and they'll support any company that that produces hemp-based products. So the market's there. So we've got the farmers, we got the processors, and we got the market. But this is like the chicken and egg
Well,
dichotomy. It's like
that's
who's going to
it's
go
kind of
first?
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to get my mind to wrap around that for a lot of reasons, because I think basically from Jack Hare's book, we all know that in 1937, Popular Mechanics had a cover story about hemp being the next billion-dollar crop. And it was the first time the word billion had been used as
Yeah.
$1 billion featuring a crop. And Popular Mechanics pointed out that they'd gotten the decorticator going now, that because of the decorticating machine, they were able to easily harvest hemp and to turn it into paper fiber. And it's going to have a great industry. They had a lot of products for it, and it was going to be a great industrial boom for our country. You would think that just by presenting that one document to any logical individual would immediately break down the walls.
Yeah, but the difference is, like I said, all the parts are there. It's like a puzzle. All the pieces are there. We just haven't connected everything together, and until we get the farmers and the processors and the market to all agree, because look, it's gonna certain genetics are gonna grow here in Kentucky that aren't gonna grow up in Maine or up in Oregon or down in Florida. There's got to be different genetics that are going to be acclimated to different climates. So that
Right.
has to be addressed. But
Right.
but all the pieces are here to put together. We just have to get the will and the fortitude to get everybody to sit down at the table and saying, okay, if the farmers grow it, okay, then the processor will process it, and you have the end users that guarantee that they'll buy it. That to me, that's where it starts, because if the farmers grow it and they don't have any place, they're not going to grow it unless they can sell it, and the processors aren't going to spend millions of dollars to build a processing facility unless they know they have the farmers and the market. And the market's not going to do a damn thing until they know what the price and the quality and the guaranteed supply chain. If they know that's there, then they would do it. So my thing is, I came up with a pledge. It's on the Federation of International Hemp Organizations, FIHO.org, and up on the top right hand side of the it has pledge. You can click on that, and it'll go down and take you to a pledge. And what it's for companies to sign up that say, once you can show me a guaranteed price and a guaranteed quality and a guaranteed supply chain, then you meet all my criteria, then we'll buy it. And if we can get these big corporations to sign that pledge that shows their support, now it's going to be easier for the processors to go to the bank and say, look, Toyota says they'll buy our fiber from us if we can get this guaranteed supply chain. So we need the money to build 3 facilities because they're not going to buy from one. We've got our farmers. Here's our farmers right here that says they'll grow it. And all we need is the money for the processing facility. It makes it easier. So to me, it's going to take, this is going to go the same way as soybeans unless we all sit down and work together to make this a commodity, because the hardest thing to do is to build an industry from the ground up. It's the hardest thing to do.
Al Grant, this is a good spot for you to jump in here, because I know Canada has a huge hemp industry, and that they've even utilized it to help to create a hemp car, and they make hemp foods, and they can make hemp clothing. So how are they doing it up there?
We have actually near me, about an hour to the southwest of me, there is a hemp farm, as well as northwest of me. There's another place that's a big hemp farm, and they have a sign out there letting people know that it is hemp, just so that people don't think that's cannabis and want to go in and think that they can just steal it, right? So, but there's hemp products. I've got hemp T-shirts, hemp hoodies. You can buy it in the stores, hemp products. Farmers have it. I know that as well. We've had one of our past guests, Shauna Dunbar. She was talking about her house that is made out of have hemp products in it, as far as the bricks and other things within the interior of the house. And yeah.
Well, the big problem that we're having now is the cannabis folks. You know what I say, and which is true. If the difference between hemp and marijuana or cannabis is like the difference between a horticultural crop and an agricultural crop, and people are saying, well, the only thing that's really making any money right now is the cannabis crops, and I agree with that. But if you look at the grand picture, the American farmers are going to, like 0.1% of American farmers are going to be helped by cannabis, and 99.9% are going to be helped by industrial hemp. So that's why my focus is basically on industrial hemp, because cannabis doesn't need any help. I mean, cannabis
No.
is
got
here
that.
to stay.
And
So
Gatewood pointed out that when they outlawed this plant, it was the biggest wealth transfer in
yes,
human history. It took the money out of the out of the farmer's pocket. I'm Lex Dexick. And put it into the pockets of the petrochemical and the pharmaceutical industries.
well, what people don't know is when all this was going on, Henry Ford and George Washington Carver and I think it was James Hale. He wrote a book called the name of the book was Chemergy, Chemurgy, Chemergy. And what Chemergy was the science of using carbon-based products or plants to make industrial material. And what their vision was during the Industrial Revolution is making farmers a source of the material for the Industrial Revolution instead of the hydrocarbons. Because just about anything you can make from a hydrocarbon, you can make from a hydrocarbon. So there was this a group of guys that were trying to say, let's let the farmers do it, because if you think about it, these wealthy guys had enough money to punch holes in the ground, which very few people could, and they had the money to build facilities that would process that oil and turn it into something, and they were getting it for free because they're just punching the holes in the ground. So they accumulated all that wealth in just a few people, where if it had have gone the other way and gone into a carbohydrate economy, all that money would have been spread out all across the United States of the farmers, and it would have made a whole difference in how
It would have.
the economy
And
came together, and it wouldn't have been as consolidated as it is now.
And you mentioned that Henry Ford was involved with that, and that interview that I was doing with Gatewood Galbraith and the photograph that Al put up. When I was talking to Gatewood, all of a sudden Jack Hare comes busting in the middle of the interview, and again you can see that on my website. And he had just gotten a fax from the Henry Ford Museum verifying that Henry Ford had actually developed a hemp car. And it took Jack almost a year to unearth that evidence. And when he did, he happened to be right there by Gatewood Galbraith, and the two of them overlooked that fax showing the Henry Ford car. And it was rather interesting to catch that moment in history of hemp history where Jack Hare had unearthed the proof of the Ford car. So
yeah, I mean,
again, Jack Hare, we owe Jack Hare so much. I was blessed to have the opportunity to work with him and know him. I didn't mean to interrupt again, but
yeah, well,
I try to give credit where credit's due.
yes, I agree 100%. But Bakelite is what they called it back then. And if you look at these old ringer phones where you lift the thing up, put it to your ear, and you talked into the little thing, that earpiece and that mouthpiece were Bakelite. They were made from hydrocarbons. They were made from plant plastics. So it's not anything new. It's just coming back into, a buddy of mine has the hemp plastic company out of Australia. and they're working with a lot of the automobile companies now. But I think in the future, this is, we're finally slowly working our way back into the past.
Are you talking about Paul Beheim?
Yeah, Paul Benham.
He's been a guest on the show a few times. You're right. It's amazing what he's able to do. He sent some hemp plastics to Paul Stanford, who's going to be one of the keynote speakers at the Texas Hemp Stock. And the plastic that's made from this plant is really fabulous.
Yeah, both.
Listen, we're running out of time here, guys, and I'll tell you what, Joe. We need. If I know you're a busy dude, but maybe when you come back from Texas, we could do more. Your stories, your history book in your head is just fascinating, and our goal, the three of us here, has been to try and collect information about cannabis that is not well known. And boy, you've just given us a whole bunch of that. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I'm glad to share the knowledge that people shared with me back in the day. We talked with so many farmers that had grown hemp, and talked about riding on in the wagon on the top of a pile of hemp, taking it to Danville to a mill in Danville. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many stories that I heard along the way. We even had a bunch of old farmers that had old equipment that they had a club. We actually got them to bring one of their tractors with one of the belts on the side, and we hooked it up to that hemp softener and got it running again there in Paris after, what was 50 years.
Yeah, cool.
Running again. So there's so many stories. There's just not enough time to tell all of them.
Well, I don't have enough time for you to talk about your website and let people know your URL and how they can find you.
Well, we're working on the website. It's just the initials, the Kentucky Hemp Growers Cooperative Association. So it's khgac.com. And we should have it finished. We just got some preliminary stuff up right now. We should have it finished by the next couple of weeks, hopefully by the time hemp stock comes around. But it's been quite the journey over the last 33 years. I never in my life thought that this was where my life's work would end up being, but I sure am glad I've been part of it.
So are we.
I laugh because you're talking to three other people who they never thought we were going to grow up and be cannabis hemp activists.
It's a small club. It's a small club. So
and everybody has their own story of like accidentally dropping into this thing, and it's everybody's got a different story, which is all of them are really interesting because everybody came to hemp into a different way. And it's always good to hear those stories. I enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, we enjoyed having you, Joe. It was a great show. Great show.
Well, anything you want to say to the audience, Joe, before we wrap this up?
Well, we can talk about it at another time, but we've got a technology called lipid bond that we developed for the cannabis industry. And what it is it's not solvent, it's solventless, and we get 96% extraction rate, which are infusion, because it's an infusion process, and it's a sealed, pressurized container, so we don't lose any of the cannabinoids or terpenes or flavonoids or any of that. So we get exactly whatever you put in there comes out, and we can take cannabis and put in there and put some ashwagandha or mushroom or anything else in there with it, and it infuses everything that's in there into the carrier oil. And so it's a way of really purifying, or not purifying, but getting everything out of the plant. Because if you use CO2 or ethanol, you lose a lot of the minors and you lose a lot of the terpenes and everything else. But with this process, you don't lose anything. So it's a way of mimicking exactly what's in whatever you put in there is shows up in the oil.
All
And
right. So I'll take that as a yes. I'll
yes,
come back and talk about that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Very
think it's
good.
something we may have to demand.
yeah. Well, and people can go to Lipid Bond. It's LIPIDBOND.com, lipidbond.com, and you can look at the technology and kind of get an idea. We even had a guy that was testing all of our stuff. He came back and said, "I'd like to do a white paper on your technology." And we don't want to write white paper. He said, "No, I'm not going to charge you. Because I've been testing hemp for years, and I've never seen such a complete array of terpenes and cannabinoids on a consistent basis ever." And so he wrote a white paper describing the technology. And so it's revolutionary. I think we're going to do like $100,000 challenge. Anybody that can produce an oil the way we produce oil, we give them $100,000.
Wow,
So that's something else that's coming up.
Let's bring us back to Jack's book, $50,000 award. If you
There you go. There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
Right.
I offer no rewards in my book. Just read it. That's reward enough.
Right.
And for those people who are wondering what that's about, Jack Herer, when he put out his book, first offered $10,000, then upped it to $50,000 to anybody who could find one thing in his book that was not true.
Yeah, that was great, and they got a lot of attention.
I did the same thing. I borrowed from Jack when I started pot. I said the same thing over and over every conference we started for years, that never in anything that Patients at a Time had ever said or written had ever been challenged by an individual, an organization, or a government.
Yeah, no.
And that's the integrity that comes, folks, with this kind of information. None of us are making this shit up. Joe's every word he said happened. And again, most important for us to have this show and others like it archived. And we really have that. And we really hope you will look at it. The value here is incredible. Anyway, I'll shut up. Joe, it's been great, man. And I love your backyard. It's been just sitting here watching the backyard's been fun. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Birds are coming and going. All
I know. I think the birds were kind of drowning me out there at one point.
Maybe there's a bunch of them running around there.
Well, the next time we come back, these banana trees back here will probably be 8 or 10 feet tall. I've got like 400 here in the backyard, so it looks like you're in Hawaii during the summer here.
All right, I look forward to the update in the bananas.
And you guys, if you ever come to Kentucky, you got a place to call home.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And Al Byrne, tell people once again how they can get your book.
Well, it's a book without Joe Hickey in it, so it's a little bit less than I thought it was. But it's everywhere: Apple Books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you get a book, it's a book. There's 360 pages. You can buy that hard soft cover, which I like because I like to have a feel of a book in my hand. But it's also an ebook. They want me to make it into a voice book, and I'm thinking about it. But right now it's an ebook, and again, it's history, it's stories after story after story, just like you heard from Mr. Hickey. It's people and what they did and how they did it, and some of it's hilarious, like Joe was saying. Some of it's deadly serious and very scary to the freedom, et cetera, of the people that were involved. But it's all true, as best as I can recall. It's 40 years. So it's a long second of time. But it, again, concentrates for me more on medical cannabis, where Mr. Hickey's life is concentrated more on hemp. I mentioned hemp. It's very important to the book, but it's a medical cannabis book. And again, if you're a healthcare professional, you should read this thing. Every healthcare professional that has come to me since I've published this book has said simply, wow, there is so much in there I did not know. And I have passed that on to my buddy who's a nurse or my doc that I work with. And so it's a valuable book. And I hope you'll all enjoy it.
And Al Graham, I know that you're busy up there with the PACE Network, trying to let everybody know how important it is to make this plant a wonderful thing to use in our daily life.
Yes, you can find us at paceradio.net. PACE stands for People Advocating Cannabis Education. Not only do we have cannabis, but we also talk about psychedelics as well. So,
yeah, it's not just radio. Guys, it's just not radio. It's just a radio network, but it's all in video. It's just because when PACE Radio Network and the PACE Radio Show got started, we weren't doing any video. It was just all in audio. And when I went to the video route, I just kept the radio end in there. And not only do we do video stuff, but we do release the audio podcasts afterwards. So we're still radio. We're still doing radio.
And as Al Graham pointed out, and Al Byrne has pointed out, and as Mr. Hickey has pointed out, we make it a point to tell you the truth. And Time for Hemp has been preaching the truth about this plant from the very first time we opened our mouth and said how important it is to take time for hemp.
Look at all that money. Look at all that money. Yeah, the money that they've spent. Take another look and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, 'cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Well, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, it's time for hemp. Throughout Earth's history, hemp has been used, no mystery. Hemp was legal to pay your taxes for more than a century. Faxes, the founding fathers make sense to me. It's time to grow hemp legally. Think of all its uses. It's money that's well spent. Right now, no excuses. It's time for hemp. Sustainable green industry, that's our intent. A better place this world will be. It's time for hemp. Fuel and food and clothes and soap, housing, cars, yeah, cars, no joke. Henry Ford built a car of hemp. It's time for us to do it again. People being flowers far with Valentine as it's meant. Right now, it's time for hemp. Hemp is a true necessity for the wealth and protection of this country. Thomas Jefferson spoke those words. He knew the value of these herbs. It's time to lift the hemp. It's time to make a strong stance. Well, yes, we can. I know we can. We can make a difference. Yes, we can. Just like birds of a feather, work together to live the hemp. Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, 'cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp.